Just a quick idea to take us into Shabbat. This week's Parsha is Parshat Acharei and Kedoshim. It's a double whammy. It's going to be a long one. Acharei, which talks primarily about the Yom Kippur service as it existed in the time of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and latterly in the Beit HaMikdash, and talks about relationships which are not good for people, and Kedoshim, which talks about holiness. So let's talk a little bit about holiness. And I think the best way to introduce the topic of holiness is with the events that transpired this week, which called attention. And I think the world spoke for itself in reaction to the events as they unfolded. I refer, of course, to the Super League, which was announced this week, that was going to siphon off 15 other teams and Tottenham Hotspur, a world-class team, and it was going to take all of that competition and put it into one Super League. And let's face it, the world went mad, especially in the United Kingdom. Fans were up in arms as they spelled the end of football as we know it. Now, we don't need to get political. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of whether they were right or whether they were wrong. But there was something that caught my attention with this particular episode, which is the following. The world reacted very negatively to the concept that we could claim that there are groups out there who could exist on a different level of reality to everybody else. How unfair it would be to say that these 16 teams are any more superior than other teams from around the world. And, you know, it's funny. Everyone spoke with their opinions pretty much very negatively. We've seen a number of teams dropping out as a result of the complaints from fans. But it dawned on me, in Judaism, we very much have an idea that exists, the concept of Kedusha, the concept of a holy nation, a holy country, holier days of the year, holier places to be, holier groups of Jews. Even the Kohanim exist in a different plane than the rest of us plebs, right? Kohanim would have to be much more careful with their ritual purity status. So are we not guilty of the same thing? Are we not saying that some things are better than others, that some things exist to the exclusion of other groups? Do we get a sniff of this at all in our practice of Judaism? And I was thinking that if we think that, we might be misunderstanding the concept of holiness completely. The word for holiness, kedusha, is linked to many other words. Let's explore a few of them now. We have a concept known as hekdesh, when something gets set aside and sanctified for the use in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. It has a name that is given to it, which is called hekdesh. When a couple get married under the chuppah, the ceremony is known as kiddushin. Kiddushin comes from the same root of kadosh, of kedusha, of holiness. But what is the marriage? The marriage exists as an exclusive entity and has its own identity to the exclusion of all others. Not because a husband and a wife, when they choose to spend their lives together, are claiming that nobody else is good enough, but within the relationship, they are saying that they are prepared to devote themselves exclusively to each other to the exclusion of everybody else. And hekdesh as well, when they dedicate something to the temple, it's not saying that it's better than anything else. The idea is that you are declaring and stating that a particular item is going to be exclusively used for one purpose and not for any other purpose. It's fascinating as well. There's another word that is linked to this word, which is a kadesha. A kadesha in the Torah is usually a woman who has designated her role in life to be quite liberal with who she engages with in the sense of relationships. She sets herself aside for promiscuity. And it's amazing, isn't it? The word for that kind of employment, if we can call it that, is linked to Kedusha. the word for holiness. So clearly holiness isn't about saying that things are better than others. It's not about sitting on a mountain, legs crossed, and meditating in a realm of holiness and spirituality. Rather, this concept of kedusha, this concept of holiness, is about setting things aside for a unique and special relationship. It doesn't mean that things are better. It means that your focus is directed in one particular direction. So how do we achieve holiness? Well, our Torah tells us. And as I said, it's not about sitting alone on a mountain meditating. The list of mitzvot that appear in this week's portion, in this week's parasha, is all about very mundane activities. There are mitzvot like keeping Shabbat, like fearing heaven, like not worshipping idols. But at the same time, there are mitzvot in this week's parasha like ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, loving others like we love ourselves, loving the stranger, not placing stumbling blocks in front of people, causing them to make mistakes, not cursing the deaf, speaking about deaf people when you know that they can't hear you. There's a mitzvah of being charitable. There's a mitzvah of being honest in business. There's a mitzvah of not taking revenge. These are all very mundane mitzvot. So it would seem then that when the Torah tells us, Kedoshim tihiyu, that you should be holy, when Hashem says that the Jewish people should be a mamleches kohanim, a kingdom of priests, v'goy kadosh, and a holy nation, it's not trying to say that we are in the Super League and everybody else is just the dead weight and just the people that we have to tread over. Rather, the concept of Kedusha, the concept of holiness, is about the relationship that we set aside, that we devote ourselves as Jewish people exclusively to the development of our character, to the development of our relationships with those around us, and also our relationship with Hashem as well. I think that's a beautiful difference, completely different to the way that we have seen this week of setting aside teams to the exclusion of all others. Rather, Judaism, Kedusha, is all about learning how to function amongst the world, learning how to be the best people that we can be, while at the same time involving others in that process as well.